Today we're talking about how parents of transgender children may respond when their child comes out to them. As the parent of two transgender adult children, I have the unique perspective of having some insight into that, so that when a transgender person says, I'm really worried about telling my parents that I'm transgender because I'm not sure how they're going to react, which is a very valid concern because you never know how someone's going to respond when you come out to them. So I thought I would put together a post, and it's up on my website, and just do a little video talking about it because having that perspective from a parent's point of view, having been there, I have from a supportive parent's view how a parent may respond, right? Because there could be negative reactions to someone coming out as transgender, but we're rooting for the home team here. We're gonna hope that the reaction is positive. So here are some things that could happen after you come out to your parents. The first is that there could be a lot of emotions. Your coming out to your parents is a very overwhelming time for you and for them. And in that moment, you've likely caught your parents off guard. There's a good chance they didn't know that this was coming. And even if they are loving and supportive of you being transgender, they're going to have a lot of feelings. So it's important to consider that their first reaction is probably not their final reaction, right? Because in that moment, they could feel joy, they could feel happiness, they could feel surprised, disbelief, shock, a whole variety of emotions. But it's important to remember that how they respond in that moment is not going to be their final response to your coming out. They're going to need a little time to process that information, and they're going to come to a final response about it. So if you're disappointed in your parents' initial reaction to your coming out, don't let it fester too much. And remember, we're talking about a positive response, not a negative response here. Just know that you probably caught your parents off guard, and that response was just in the moment, and it's not forever. They're gonna think about it, and they're gonna come back and talk to you about it again later, and it's all gonna be okay. Your parents are probably going to have a lot of questions. They're going to have more questions than you're going to want to answer. They're going to have questions that are not appropriate for them to be asking you, but they don't know that yet. And so think about giving them some grace. Answer the questions that you feel okay about answering, and then direct them to some resources to find the answer to the questions that you don't want to answer, or that they could be doing research on for themselves. But just be prepared for a lot of questions. The next thing that you should be prepared for is an adjustment period. Your parents are going to need time to get used to the idea that you are transgender. You've been thinking about this for a long time, likely, maybe even years. You have gotten used to the idea that you are a transgender person. It probably took you by surprise when you first discovered that about yourself. Your parents just learned this information about you, And so it's going to take them some time to get used to it. And there's going to be a grieving process for them. And that's normal. And it's part of their journey as being your parents of a transgender person. And so just know that that's a normal part of their being the parent of a transgender person. And it's not about you. And don't take it personally. And let them go through that without too much judgment on your part. And they should be doing that away from you and with people that they can talk to that are not you, hopefully a therapist, if not, people that they trust. But be prepared for that adjustment period as they get used to this, and be prepared for it to take as long as it takes. Um, you may think that it's taking too long, but it takes, for some people, a long time. And remember that your parents have had their whole life with you up until now as one version of yourself, and they have to get used to the whole rest of your life with you as another version of yourself, and that doesn't just happen overnight. Which brings me to my next point, is that your parents are going to make mistakes as they get used to using your new name and pronouns. Because they've had that whole period of time with you using a different name and pronouns. They've used that set of name and pronouns for, you know, however long, decades even, and they've said it hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times, and they can't just switch overnight to using a new name and pronouns because their brain has to make a new association between you and that new name and those new pronouns. And it takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes a lot of time and practice. And their brain has to make those new pathways and those new associations, and they're going to slip up and they're going to make mistakes. And so long as they keep on trying, don't give them a hard time about it and expect them to just be able to do it, because it's going to make it more difficult for them to be able to keep on moving forward. So be patient with your parents. They're doing the best that they can, unless they're not willing to do it, and then that's a whole different scenario, right? That's for the person who's being difficult and not accepting, and we're rooting for your parents here. And then the last thing is be prepared to set some boundaries with your parents about who they can and can't tell about you being transgender, because your parents aren't going to know that unless you tell them. Are you ready to be out to the whole family and to their friends or to people out in different social groups? Maybe you're not, but your parents don't know that unless you tell them. And you can't expect them just to know what you're ready for and what you're not ready for. And if you don't say anything and they go out into the world and they share with, their friend group or at church or wherever, and then you find out and get mad about it, that's not fair to your parents because they had no way of knowing. So set those boundaries with them. Let them know what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and what you're comfortable with and not comfortable with. And it will be a better time for everybody. So coming out to your parents is a big deal, and it can feel hard and overwhelming for you. And just remember that it is overwhelming for your parents too. And they want what's best for you and they love you. And the initial response may not go how you hoped and anticipated, but give them time and have conversations with them about it, and know that your parents love you and they want to support you in the best way that they can. And we'll talk more soon.